start the hour in Burundi, where rival factions in the country have held face-to-face talks in a bid to end a nearly year-long political crisis. The talks, chaired by United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, took place in Burundi's capital, Bujumbura. After the meeting, the leaders and the UN chief, who is leading mediation efforts, said that all sides had promised to engage in inclusive dialogue. Susan Mwangeli has more.
It's news that many Burundians have been hoping for, that after months of violence, rival factions have finally agreed to hold talks. Previous attempts have so far failed, but on Tuesday, visiting UN Chief Ban Ki-moon, who met the leaders from both sides, said there had been major progress.
And my invitation last evening, representatives of the political actors from both the government ruling party and opposition party sat down together to discuss the future of the country. Nothing prevents from continuing on this course. I was very much encouraged that the political leaders, whether they are sitting in government ruling party or opposition, they promised that they will engage in inclusive dialogue. This is what President Nkurunziza also confirmed, that he will be engaging in inclusive dialogue.
President Pierre Nkurunziza also cancelled international arrest warrants against several exiled opposition leaders and said 2,000 prisoners would be released.
We have asked for their assistance when it comes to initiating talks to reconcile Burundians. Everyone knows that Burundians always come together when it comes to talks. We have shown our commitment with the announcement to free 2,000 prisoners, excluding those accused of disturbing the peace.
Burundi has been mired in a sometimes violent political crisis since April of last year, when Nkurunziza sought and won what is widely seen as an unconstitutional third term. During talks with Ban Ki-moon, Nkurunziza also appealed to Ban to help end Rwanda's support for Burundian rebels alleged by Burundian authorities and UN investigators. Rwanda has repeatedly denied the allegations.
We spoke about other issues facing the region, especially Rwanda, which is a country that has been causing us problems. We have asked for their support to help us regarding Rwanda and to stop provoking us, so we can go back to having good neighborly relations like we used to.
No question.
Ban's visit is aimed at reviving stalled efforts to end the dispute and comes after the Burundi government appeared to have softened its position towards opponents by agreeing to receive a delegation of African heads of state expected later this week. Susan Mwangeli, CCTV.
Well, let's bring you more on these latest developments from Burundi. Joining us live from the capital, Bujumbura, is CCTV's Robert Nagila, as well as Liling Tan joining us live from our studios in New York. Now, Robert, let's start with you. I imagine that what's taken most people by surprise is the change in gear, or at least the softened stance by President Nkurunziza. He's talking about, an openness to dialogue, reinstating various media freedoms, and of course releasing prisoners. How has his changed stance been received there?
Well, it's still early days. That announcement by President Pierre Nkurunziza and the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon was made this morning. So what has not yet seeped out to the local populace within Bujumbura and outside Bujumbura. However, the few people that we've spoken to are welcoming this move. This is a country that at the moment is basically stuck. It's not moving forward, especially after that heavily contested elections in which President Pierre Nkurunziza ran for a third term and won. Now, the opposition, of course, refused to accept those results, said that the way the elections were conducted, they were not free and fair. There was a lot of intimidation in it. However, just looking at the overtures, the moves made by President Pierre Nkurunziza today, it does, those who are spoken to say that this appears to be a genuine overture from his side to resolve this issue. The release of 2,000 political prisoners arrested during that heavily contested period when protests were breaking out. The opening of two private radio stations. Remember that basically all private media here in the capital, Bujumbura, and much of Burundi had been shut down during those protests. So those we've spoken to say that it does appear that this is a genuine effort by the president and his administration to seek a resolution, a political resolution. The mere fact that they're talking about inclusive dialogue where the opposition and the civil society will be involved, they say that shows that the president is willing to resolve this issue. And it couldn't come sooner for the people of Burundi. Economically, this country is basically on its knees. There's a lot of people who've lost their jobs because of the prevailing situation. We know that several donor countries have cut aid to Burundi. And the hope is that if the situation is resolved fast enough and to everyone's liking, then we will be able to see the money begin to flow into Burundi again to be able to help the people uplift their standard of living and the economy basically do much, much better.
Well, Liling, let's bring you in here now. Of course, with the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon coming to Burundi, in person, certainly an indication of just how seriously the United Nations is taking the issue of Burundi. Tell us now, we understand there's been some Burundi-related movements even at the level of the Security Council. What more can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, we know that France wants to deploy a UN police force to manage the violence there in Burundi, and it has just presented a draft proposal to the Security Council suggesting as such. Now, at this point, there aren't a lot of specifics, which is why the French delegation is asking the Secretary General to weigh options and consider when and how such a UN police deployment can be sent out. And they're hoping for some sort of an answer from the Secretary General within 15 days. Now, the French delegation is also hoping to get an endorsement from the Security Council for this proposal before that meeting among the African Union heads of state in Bujumbura this Thursday. Now, in a statement quoted by the AFP news agency, the UN ambassador from France, Francois Delat, said that the French mission, hopes to leverage on the timing now to present this proposal now that we're seeing some movement, some positive movement on the diplomatic front. We are seeing that it seems the Secretary General has accomplished what the Security Council, the UN Security Council, could not when it visited Burundi a month ago after its offers for help were rejected by President Nkurunziza. And it now seems that the Secretary General has been able to generate some positive movement.
Well, let's return to you now, Robert. It is, of course, very encouraging to see these positive moves towards peace. But we understand, as you mentioned earlier, it couldn't come a moment too soon, because even though there's progress on paper, on the ground, it is a different story. We understand there's been grenade attacks in Bujumbura. Do we have any more details on that?
Absolutely, and that at this particular moment is a major concern, not just for the administration here, but the people on the ground and the international community, the donor community that is trying to assist Burundi to resolve this situation. Now, those attacks happened before UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon arrived here in Bujumbura. There were 4 simultaneous grenade attacks around Bujumbura, the capital. 6 people were killed in those attacks and scores others injured. Now, this happened early in the morning, as we have seen in the past. Immediately after those attacks have happened and the area is cleared and people go about their business, it's almost as if people are now getting used to this kind of attacks. Sad to say, but that appears to be the reality on the ground. Business then takes over and moves on very, very quickly. However, like I said, that is a major concern. Burundi has been pointing fingers at its neighbor Rwanda, saying that Rwanda, and this they're basically pegging on the report that was tabled before the UN Security Council, alleging that Rwanda was training Burundian refugees in the refugee camps to come back and carry out attacks against the government. And the administration of Pierre Nkurunziza feels vindicated by that report, because it's something that they have been insisting for quite some time now, that Rwanda is partly behind these attacks. We have heard from Rwanda. They say they have absolutely nothing to do with it. And as one of the measures they are taking, they say that perhaps what they need to do then is to move those refugees to a third country. Now, they're still exploring that particular option. We wait to hear more on that. However, this is a very worrying trend, what we're talking about, the grenade attacks that have been happening in the capital here, Bujumbura, over the last several months, especially with 4 African presidents expected here in the next day or two, led by the AU chairman, Idris Deby of Chad. Also accompanying him will be South African President Jacob Zuma. We expect them to meet with President Pierre Nkurunziza to try and resolve the situation, or to take it a step further from where it has reached now, to initiate this talk so that they can start taking place. However, the one thing we do know is that Burundi, and they have made this very, very clear, categorically clear, they will not allow any foreign troops, whether in the name of peacekeepers, to come here, because they feel that they have the capacity to control that situation. And I can tell you one thing, just walking down the streets in the capital here this afternoon, it seemed like any other normal African capital city. Business was going on, there was traffic, and it does appear that on the face of it, everything is normal. However, those underlying issues still need to be resolved. And it is hoped that with the presidents arriving here in a day or two, as I said, that will be one of the things that will be put on the table and resolved as well.
Oh, absolutely. We will, of course, be keeping a close eye on those developments. Thanks very much to Robert Nagila, live for us there in Bujumbura, as well as CCTV's Liling Tang, joining us there from New York.